Good evening, I'm Lyndon McIntyre. Tonight we depart from the traditional format of the Fifth Estate for a story from where I grew up, where I worked for years as a reporter, wrote 3 books about the people and the place, and yet could never have imagined what I'm about to tell. It's how an international crisis in the Roman Catholic Church touched down like a tornado, leaving faithful Catholics convinced that the criminal behavior of a handful of their priests has been compounded by betrayal by their bishops and their pope.
I first heard it in church, and you feel like standing up and saying, "Get lost," or whatever, you know?
The parishioners are being told, "We'll give you first option to buy what we took from you."
When they turn around and say, "Why can we not turn to Rome?" It's very difficult to stand in front of people as a priest and say, "Because Rome won't do it." And I do appreciate that it's a legitimate question.
All roads, as we uncover these crimes, lead to Rome, lead to the Vatican.
Well, I grew up in Cape Breton. I went to school in Cape Breton, was a practicing Catholic in the traditional sense, worked here as a newspaper reporter. I have a house here that I use in the summer months. And when I get here, people invariably say, "When did you come home?" I was aware that sexual abuse had been a factor around here. Sexual abuse has led to the destruction of people's lives. People have killed themselves. I wondered how far I could go as a reporter to tell that story before I was into realms where people would be unwilling to talk and I would be into speculation. I decided that I would explore it myself and try to do it from a fictional point of view. Then I found out in the course of doing the book that a priest I knew, right handy here, was a horrific sexual abuser of both boys and girls. I didn't know that, and it came as a horrific shock to me. Sexual abuse is probably the most profoundly damaging betrayal that anybody can experience, because it always happens with someone who is known and trusted. And there can be no greater betrayal than the betrayal of someone who is about as trusted as you can humanly be. And around here, that's a Catholic priest.
Father Hugh MacDonald made his first court appearance to face 23 sex-related charges.
Mombercat pleaded guilty to sexual assault and was sentenced to 2 years in prison.
Today, another lawsuit was filed.
We had cases where 4 in particular priests were charged and convicted of sexual abuse. These weren't priests who were found in one parish, caught there, and prosecuted. These were priests who were routinely moved around among a number of parishes. So it was kind of like a plague that traveled through the diocese.
He'd call and say to my mom, "I need something done at the church." It was usually me that he asked for. In the beginning, it felt very natural for him to want to give you a hug. When the hugs became different, then an unease set in. It was like, is this something that's really happening? Am I imagining this? When things progressed further than that, it was like, I can't believe this just happened.
Where am I at? If I run outside the door, will anybody help me? Can I scream? Will I be heard? All these thoughts are going through my mind as he was abusing me. Everything good in me was taken out And it was just like put into a blender. How do you exist after that?
I hated myself. All my pictures, I just scraped the faces off them. I didn't want no reminder as a kid. So I got rid of them all.
One of those prosecuted, and probably one of the worst abusers in the diocese, was a man who came to our home when I was a kid growing up. He was my uncle's parish priest in the northern part of Cape Breton at the time, and my uncle would bring him to the house, and he was a gregarious, friendly guy who loved music and loved to drink. And everyone thought what a down-to-earth, fine priest he was. Turned out that he was a serial abuser who created havoc all over this place.
We were a large family. We were 14 kids. My mom was a stay-home mom. My dad was a coal miner. And we were what we considered your average coal mining family. I think UV befriended my mother right away. He got in good terms with her. She trusted him. She felt that this was a good place for her kids to be involved with.
The abuse took place here in the church, next door at the rectory, and in his vehicle.
What prevented you from going to your father or mother?
I hear other people say, I went home and I told right away, and they got a slap across the face and never to say that again. Don't you dare say that about this godly priest. And I think that's what I felt like. I was betraying somebody with this. Not he was betraying somebody, but I was betraying somebody with this. And I felt that if I told, that one, either I wouldn't be believed, or two, I would probably get a good whipping and sent back anyway. I was so fearful of people finding that out that I said, I'll never tell anybody this.
And this fear persisted until you were a grown-up man, married with children.
Yeah, and in my late teens, I many times thought about how I could take my own life without, make it look like an accident and no one would ever know. I'd have my father's car and coming over the new bridge in New Waterford and thinking, if I just go off the road, I'll die. Accident, no one will ever know. That's how serious I was about nobody knowing that secret. My brother, on April 4th of 2002, went missing. We had a call from his wife saying that David didn't come home today, and that was so unlike him. My sister and I decided to fly out to the West Coast, because now there's an RCMP search going on because they thought maybe he went off the road. On the 16th day, they had found David. He had taken his own life and left a suicide note. He had taken his own life because he couldn't live with that secret anymore about the abuse from Father UV McDonald. I was so broken by what I just heard because I thought, had I exposed that secret many, many years ago, then my brother would still be alive. That's how I felt at that point in time. And I've struggled with that for many, many years. I promised my brother that I would make sure that the people responsible for his abuse, and I thought his death, would pay for that, and that would be the Catholic Church of the diocese.
Father Hugh MacDonald made his first court appearance. The 80-year-old priest returned voluntarily to Cape Breton from Ontario to face 23 sex-related charges.
He eventually died before being held accountable for what he had done.
Father MacDonald, any comment on the charges, sir?
Some people could have said, well, I've tried. We laid criminal charges and we did what we could. But Ron took that obligation to his brother so seriously that he felt he had to do something.
A man whose brother killed himself 6 years ago is spearheading a suit against the Diocese of Antigonish.
The three things that I want this to do was to get that accountability, to get some type of peace for those victims who had come forward, and to free the people who have never come forward.
Are we talking dozens? Are we talking hundreds?
More than 100 people have filed claims under the class action process. Almost 140 claims were filed.
The big surprise was that the bishop of the day, Raymond Lahey, was more than anxious to reach an amicable settlement. I guess in religious terms, the victims and the lawyers were looking for a confession that bad things had happened thanks to the misbehavior of some priests, and they wanted an act of contrition that would take the form of some kind of material compensation. And they found that Bishop Lahey was ready to reach some kind of an agreement without a whole lot of pain.
He was championing this process, and he was able to speak about it with that kind of passion and that kind of belief.
They typically fight these claims vigorously. So to have someone in authority say, we want to find a better way, that was incredibly refreshing.
Over the course of 5 years, I really felt that this guy was decent. And I felt really at peace with signing that settlement with him on that day.
The Roman Catholic Diocese of Antigonish has agreed to pay up to $13 million to people who were sexually abused by any of its priests.
I want them to know how terribly sorry we are, how wrong this abuse was, and how we are now trying to right these past wrongs.
Shortly after the big settlement, I happened to be on a reporting assignment in California when somebody contacted me by BlackBerry asking me if I could suggest someone in Antigonish Diocese who could give a reasonable and official comment on the fact that Bishop Raymond Lahey had just been arrested. I thought it was a joke. Sad to say, it was no joke.
Today, police say that Bishop Lahey is facing child pornography charges.
Do you have anything to say to your parishioners, sir?
What was your response when you found out what he was facing?
Well, disbelief. You know, the man that you're working with, the man that you're talking to several times a week, the man that you're seeing regularly at meetings and events is not the man that I'm hearing about. It was the watershed event in the past 2 years of this diocese, and it's going to be, I think, for some years to come. It changed almost everything.
Well, the big change was that a number of sexual abuse survivors decided that they wanted no part of the settlement that Bishop Lahey had negotiated. It was tainted as far as they were concerned, and they launched their own lawsuits against the diocese, and they were insisting that this time they would name and shame the priests that molested them. One of them was a Father Alan MacDonald, who was running amok among the children in a parish just a few miles from where I grew up.
Today, another lawsuit was filed. Philip Latimer says as a boy, he was abused by a priest in his hometown of Harvabushi. He considered accepting compensation under a settlement recently negotiated by Lahey in a separate class action suit, but decided to launch his own suit when he learned about Lahey's arrest.
When the man that orchestrated the deal was no different than the man that committed the crime, that did it. That did it for me. I could have took their money and nobody'd be none the wiser. My neighbor wouldn't know a thing. And you know what? That would have suited my character at the time, right? By taking the money and nobody knowing anything. Because I didn't want anybody to know anything in the past. But now I'm not afraid about people knowing everything. But that's what the diocese is afraid of, people knowing everything. I want the floodgates to open. You'd be at the church as an altar boy, and afterwards he'd ask you down to the house. He would give us alcohol and pizza and possibly ask us down to watch a hockey game. Eventually you'd find yourself there alone. The only thing I can remember is looking at the ceiling and just begging for this not to happen. There's many victims that can't come forward because they can't even today speak about it. They live in silent horror. There's men in the past from Harbour-Bushy and other areas that has committed suicide, that has died in a drunken car accident. But the question is, why?
After it came out, when my brother went through it right on TV, it just totally made me start thinking about it all the time.
So it didn't necessarily have a good effect when Philip started?
No.
It just threw you right back into it?
Yeah.
And what happened?
Well, I started drinking a lot more and started doing some drugs and that, and I was thinking back like I could have been a better father. And
so how low did it get? You tried to kill yourself. What Antigonish Diocese has added to the discussion is this whole question of accountability. Who will pay for the remediation of crime? Right now it looks like the people who are obliged to pay are the people who are perhaps less able to pay than any other diocese that I can think of in the country.
They have come from parish to parish to collect monies.
Why pick on the lowest members of the totem pole? It would be much easier if we went up the pole and went to the Vatican and say, sell one of those statues, sell one of those pictures.
Coal during the 50s and 60s symbolized the vulnerability and the dependence of the Cape Breton economy. Today, it's acquired an entirely new symbolic value. It's the rock upon which a sound economic future can be built.
When I worked here as a reporter in the early 70s, there were 10,000 people working in the steel plant here, associated construction, the coal industry, the manufacture of coke, which was the fuel for the steel industry. 10,000 jobs, none of which remain today.
As far as world-scale steel production is concerned, we're now spectators at a game that's been postponed indefinitely.
In a single generation, the geography that is enclosed by the Diocese of Antigonish has lost its three principal economic mainstays: coal, mining, steel making, and the ground fishery. This, of course, translates into an economic problem that exacerbates the burden that has been placed on the Catholic population of this area to come up with $18.5 million at last count to compensate people who were victims of sexual abuse over the last half century.
This is an open letter to His Excellency Bishop Raymond J. Leahy. Your Excellency, the Diocese of Antigonish had agreed to a multi-million-dollar settlement in a class action lawsuit involving victims of abuse by its own Roman Catholic priests. On a small island such as Amadam, where the jobs are few and far between, it's a total mess to find out that the sum of $159,263.09 has been taken away to pay for the settlement of the sex abuse victims. What prompted me to write the letters was the fact that the onus was on us to pay. I wasn't pleased. So then I decided I was going to go public and write letters, and I've written many.
What happens if a parish says, go away, Father Paul.
Well, they have said it. Some places, and not parishes, but individuals have certainly said, go away. This is not our problem. It's not my problem. You shouldn't be doing this to my parish.
Don't get me wrong. I totally agree that they should be compensated. That is a must. But to use the smaller churches where our ancestors have given everything they had, and my parents, monies that they didn't have, to keep their church going and to make their community a better place to live, I think, no, that's wrong.
Welcome to another Kaylee here at the Mabu Community Centre, and of course, Tuesdays mean more great traditional Scottish music.
I know in the last years, the hall committee looks after keeping the hall maintained, and not a penny comes from the parish. It's a crucial centre. Practically everything we have here, we have it in the hall.
Tell me about how the church got built.
They decided to build a new church here because the population, just exploded for a while.
Right.
So the carpenters came in, and the stonemason was Rankin, that's Donald Rankin. He put the foundation in, and all the work was done for nothing.
I've known Daniel Rankin all my life pretty well. Daniel was a school teacher for many years. He was active in his community. He served in municipal politics. He ran for the Conservatives. I think he does have the gumption to say what a lot of people think.
The idea of, this is great, we'll be able to buy our hall back. I just believe. What are we buying our hall back for when we owned it in the first place?
That's the...
And I'm not moving away from that.
How will this change, though, the relationship, do you think, between the church and the people in the communities?
I don't think it'll ever change the relationship if you have a good relationship with your local priest. For many of them, it has nothing to do with them or any wrongdoing on their part. But it certainly will change our attitude towards the church in the wider, and certainly towards Rome.
For them to say that, okay, well, this is what we're going to be doing, and it doesn't involve any cost to them at all, when really the entire cost of the settlement you could take from a painting down in the Vatican and sell it, and that would be it. Instead, you're beggaring every small church in the area to do it.
This is the stuff that is really challenging for people.
Am I hearing sympathy?
I don't have.
Am I hearing
answers.
sympathy from Father Abbas?
Sure. Sure you would have your sympathy for me. I mean, these are good people. They feel that everything is closing in around them, that all kinds of things are being asked of them, and when they turn around and say, well, where do we look for a little bit of help? It's very difficult to stand in front of people as a priest and say, because Rome won't do it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Murphy. There's a change of leadership tonight in a troubled Catholic diocese. Right now, a new bishop is being installed in Antigonish.
There will be lots of difficulties, lots of trials, but I have a great sense of hope.
Now, the elephant in the room, wherever this conversation happens, is what about Rome? How come it is not taking a particular interest in this particular problem?
Well, I think we need to, keep the understanding of how the church is organized. The whole church is divided into dioceses, and one of those dioceses would be the Diocese of Rome, whose bishop is the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, and he also has some role in terms of the rest of the diocese. But in terms of Rome providing financial support, for instance, it's like saying something happened here in Antigonish. Well, how come Archdiocese of Halifax is not helping out? Well, it's our problem in a sense, So
in my books, the Vatican is right at the top of that entity, and the archdiocese and the diocese, they were all responsible for what happened, so they have to take responsibility.
I've had lots of people in the diocese who have come to me and said, look, we absolutely 100% support what you're doing, but we don't think we should have to pay for it. And my answer to that is, neither do I. We have a very rich establishment. Rome has all kinds of money. And I think You know, they are ultimately responsible.
They go down to the lowest members of the totem pole and take money. It would be much easier if we went up the pole and went to the Vatican and went to those Taliban wing of the Catholic Church and say, sell one of those statues, sell one of those pictures.
What is the situation in terms of Vatican liability for crimes committed by people who are directly beneath them in the hierarchy?
Liability means that there's some kind of relationship, such as this is the employer, this is the employee. Like that kind of language doesn't work in terms of church. I'm not the employee of the Vatican.
But they appointed you.
Yeah, well, so in terms of the appointment of bishops, certainly it comes from Rome, but it also is rooted in the local church as well, in the sense that, you know, names are collected locally. Rome then goes through a whole process of consultation on the local level, and then they make the appointment.
All roads, as we uncover these crimes, lead to Rome, lead to the Vatican. All of it. Father Maciel started the Legion of Christ in the 40s in Mexico and became a worldwide inspiration to youth in ministry and formed seminaries across the world. At the same time he recruited all these seminarians, he abused them regularly and repeatedly. This kid depicted here with John Paul II is Father Maciel's biological son, whom he abused for 10 years from ages 7 to 17. And the reality is the Vatican chose to ignore it because Maciel was raising money worldwide and funneling it to the Vatican.
The search for legal remedies almost everywhere except here has been the diocesan level. You're going in the other direction.
Well, Cardinal Ratzinger is now Pope Benedict, and our focus on him as the Pope is on the station and the power of that office that has misused and abused that power when it comes to child protection.
But the legal reality ends at the diocesan level.
Well, I don't agree with the proposition that the legal reality ends at the corporation of the bishop. It is the corporation of the bishop that is created by the Vatican, and it is the Vatican to whom they answer. Until they are held accountable, they will be the ones responsible for the ongoing, continued, worldwide cover-up of clerical sexual abuse.
They've never succeeded in stamping out sexual abuse of minors in the Church's 2,000-year history. The first evidence of any type of legislation or awareness comes from a council that took place in Spain in a town called Elvira, and that was in 309. There's a document from 1866 that imposed absolute secrecy on any investigation or church prosecution of cases involving any form of sexual abuse. In 1922, the Vatican issued a procedural decree. Everyone involved, from the time the investigation began, was bound by what was called at that time the secret of the Holy Office, which was the highest form of secrecy or confidentiality in the Catholic Church. Those procedures were replaced in 2001 by another one, issued by the present Pope when he was head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. The difference was this was made public, but the processes themselves are still enshrouded in complete and absolute secrecy.
I wanted to ask you a question about Father Maciel. No,
Can you talk about?
I'm not so informed.
He became upset when I tried to ask him about the Maciel case in 2002 and slapped my hand. There's a question whether you covered
No,
up.
so a moment.
No, there's a question whether you.
Come to me when the moment is given. Not yet.
Well, we tried to.
That had to be one of the most extraordinary media ambushes of all time. A reporter from ABC News trying to get a comment from the Cardinal who, for more than 20 years, enforced the policy of secrecy regarding sexual abuse cases. Then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, now Pope Benedict XVI.
I think his response while he was in the congregation was appalling. If he saw these reports, which he did, many of them were when priests wanted to be laicized, they would describe all of this in the report. Nothing was ever done.
If in fact Cardinal Ratzinger was reading the reports that were crossing his desk during the 80s, one of the first and worst of the storms that the church would be facing in the 90s and in the early part of the new millennium came from Canada.
The Winter Commission traveled to every parish where priests abused children, poured through church records, talked to experts and victims, discovered a hierarchy that had ignored, downplayed, or covered up the abuse.
How can we help heal the hurt and anger that we know is here? And how, in the name of God, can we prevent it from happening again?
The Winter Commission. Sister Nuala Kenny was a member of that. Now she's taken it to Canadian bishops, hoping to revive its work.
From that study of what happened in Newfoundland, we understood that there were deeper systemic issues that allowed it to happen, that allowed it to go on for so long, that allowed the kind of responses that had occurred to occur. This issue won't let me sleep some nights. I didn't expect to be here. I don't even want to be dealing with this issue at the moment, but I can't do any other because I think it is serious. I have a very analytic kind of approach to things and I draw concept maps. It looks kind of a convoluted mess, but that's how complex this is. You circle issues that were relevant to the topic at hand, and then you try to see where they relate. For example, if you look at the power one, the secrecy and denial comes from different practices and systematic kind of cultural issues. If there's one thing I want to do is to help our bishops understand, head down, avoiding scandal has resulted in the greatest scandal in the history of the modern church.
This week, we heard reports of a priest abusing deaf boys at a school in the United States.
Police have raided the headquarters of the Belgian Catholic Church in Brussels.
There are allegations the Pope himself turned a blind eye to the sexual abuse of children by priests.
The crisis stretches the breadth of the continent, and it's reached inside the Pope's native Germany.
The Justice Minister here accused the Vatican of obstructing investigations into the alleged abuse.
From evidence that I have seen, what typically happened when a bishop found out that a priest had been sexually abusing children, he would usually admonish him very privately and send him to another assignment.
I dread coming here now because it brings back such a flood of emotions. It's steeped with tradition for me, it's steeped with history, and yet it's got a lot of pain.
Hugh Vincent MacDonald ended up in New Waterford because one of my client's mothers met with the bishop and said, Hugh Vincent MacDonald sexually abused my child. Like most families in Cape Breton, she had a cousin who was a priest. She called her cousin. Her cousin arranged a meeting with the bishop, Bishop Power, and she met personally with Bishop Power to see what should be done about this. Bishop Power convinced her not to go to the police and said he would take care of it, and he did. He moved Hugh Vincent to New Waterford.
To St. Agnes.
To St. Agnes, where he met Ron Martin and David Martin and many others.
Explain to me the rationale by which bishops would move sexual offenders around within a parish rather than just taking them to the local police station.
I think there certainly were mistakes made in those years where they weren't, where priests were moved around. But I think recently now in our legal settlement we've made a real effort to try to rectify that situation, so that if any kind of charge comes up nowadays, then there's no sense of moving around any priests. They're taken out of ministry.
But is it really accurate to say it was a mistake? I mean, this was policy.
Well, I don't know if it was a policy in the sense of moving around people who have been offending.
There were directives from the Vatican. You're not to go to the civil authorities. You're to avoid scandal.
Certainly there was a focus on trying to look at the whole sense of the church and avoiding scandal there. And that may have been one of our faults.
Responding to the situation has not been easy. It was sometimes very badly handled. I acknowledge the pain which the Church in America has experienced. In recent months, the Church in Ireland has been severely shaken as a result of the child abuse crisis. I also acknowledge with you the shame and humiliation which all of us have suffered because of these sins.
This Pope has been open to apology, but that's words. Actions speak louder than words. And we're now in the U.S. Supreme Court. And some are daunted by it, I'm not. There are legal impediments that the Vatican has thrown up, and they will continue to throw up, and they'll claim an immunity because they're a sovereign, you can't sue them. But you can hold sovereigns responsible, such as the Vatican, for international violations of human rights, systematic cover-up of crimes, such as slavery, genocide, and sexual abuse. And in this case, that's exactly what we have, the systematic cover-up of rape of children.
The American courts have consistently supported Anderson's position that, sovereign or not, the Vatican is legally accountable. A position recently validated by the U.S. Supreme Court in what could turn out to be a legal landmark, maybe even here.
I don't think the importance can really adequately be imagined or described today, because I think this is opening the door to some very, very serious issues for the institutional church. I think it's gravely important.
This is about a spiritual, cultural transformation in the church. There's no small thing here.
As far as the church itself and donating, never again.
The crisis in the Diocese of Antigonish has the potential to resonate far and wide within the church, because it introduces a word that has always been pretty abstract in the relationship between Catholics and the Roman Catholic hierarchy, and that word is accountability. I think people in the pews will demand accountability, and lawyers are going to start to demand a greater degree of accountability that will be surprising and foreign to the culture of this institution.
People are saying already, and very, very clearly, we want a new structure. So we want our parishes, we in our parishes want to have more control, more ownership, and more of a stake in what happens.
As laity, we were controlled by our priest, and that thankfully is over, or I shouldn't say over, but it's getting less and less.
This is about a spiritual, cultural transformation in the church. There's no small thing here. I think there are more and more people who are making a mental split between their faith and the church in ways that they've never done before. Their faith is not shaken, but boy, the credibility of the church is at stake here.
I feel so sad for the abuse victims, and I feel kind of angered towards the hierarchy. All along, they knew what was going on, they were aware of what was going on, and they were moving the priests from parish to parish to repeat the offenses that they were doing. And when I found that out, well, I made a decision that I was not going to take part in that church anymore. Unless there are major, major changes, I will watch Mass for shut-ins from my apartment.
Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit.
My faith is my rock, but as far as the church itself and donating, never again will I give another cent. And the reason for that is that if I did that, in my heart, I would feel that I'm accepting what they're doing as being right. And for me, it's wrong.
We're trying our best, and that's why, for my part, whenever I'm engaged in this, and you asked me earlier on, how do I work it in my head, I just have to keep coming back to, but this is about victims.
I go every Sunday because I believe in the Eucharist. We're a Eucharistic church, and that's why I go. Church sometimes for me is the loneliest place in the world. I feel absolutely isolated in that place. But I'm still gonna go because in the end of this, I still want to be Catholic, I think.
You cannot say Catholic priest without someone thinking pedophile. There's no other occupation on earth that has such a connection to pedophilia.
The Vatican has always been full of mystery, with its deep history and influence stretching back centuries. Yet behind all the holy rituals and traditions, there are a few secrets the Church would probably prefer to keep quiet. From shady papal decisions to hidden agendas, the Vatican has played a bigger role in history than most realize. Join us as we reveal 15 secrets the Vatican doesn't want you to know. Number 15. Vatican Bank Scandals. The Vatican Bank should be the most ethical and holy bank in the world, if those concepts can even coexist. Yet instead, the bank became infamous for a string of controversies. Despite its holy affiliations, this financial institution has seen its name marred by corruption, scandals, and mismanagement spanning several decades. The Vatican Bank, officially the Institute for the Works of Religion, has been steeped in drama ever since it launched in 1942. Created during the chaotic days of World War II to slip around Allied financial restrictions, this institution quickly became legendary for its secretive and exclusive dealings. Thanks to its immunity from wartime financial scrutiny, the Vatican Bank gained a reputation as the ultimate offshore haven, attracting clients eager for privacy and mystery. By the 1970s, however, the bank's name became tied to some eyebrow-raising deals, including a $900 million money laundering scandal involving counterfeit bonds and securities. One of the key players was Archbishop Paul Marinas, who doubled as the Vatican's chief security officer and head of the bank. Marinas became notorious for his involvement in the downfall of Michele Sindona, who was an infamous Italian banker. As Sindona's financial empire collapsed, he lost $30 million of his assets, too. Yet this was only the start of the bank's troubles. The collapse of Banco Ambrosiano was perhaps the biggest scandal of all. The Vatican Bank had handed out $1.4 billion in unsecured loans tied to Banco Ambrosiano, leading to a settlement in which the Vatican paid $244 million without admitting any fault. In 2009, an Italian journalist's tell-all book painted a shocking picture of corruption at the bank, including accounts allegedly set up to funnel money through fake charities, embezzlement schemes, and mafia ties. And if that wasn't enough, in 2012, 4 priests were linked to mafia operations, and just a year later, another priest faced arrest for allegedly helping organized crime move millions through Vatican channels. Despite multiple legal brushes, the Vatican often seemed to prefer paying fines over risking a full-on clash with criminal groups. After Pope Benedict XVI's surprising resignation in February 2013, the Catholic Church was thrown into a rush to find a new leader. His papacy had been dominated by headlines about child abuse scandals, and the Vatican's finances weren't exactly in the clear either. Enter Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio from Argentina, who became Pope Francis I, making history as the first non-European pope in over 1,200 years. Born in Buenos Aires in 1936, Pope Francis quickly became known for his efforts to modernize the Church and restore its image. Number 14. Vatican's secret alliance with the Nazis. In the chaotic aftermath of World War II, former Nazi officials faced capture across Europe, unless they had connections in the right places. Surprisingly, both the Vatican and the Red Cross were rumored to have helped notorious Nazis slip away. The Red Cross has admitted that its aid efforts for refugees were exploited by the Nazis due to overwhelmed administrators. However, new research shows that the scale of this exploitation was far greater than previously believed. Harvard researcher Gerald Steinacher uncovered thousands of leaked documents from the International Committee of the Red Cross, showing how figures like Adolf Eichmann, Josef Mengele, and Klaus Barbie avoided justice with aid from Vatican references and military checks. The Red Cross issued documents called 10 to 100s for these fugitives, helping roughly 120,000 former Nazis escape, with nearly 90% fleeing through Italy. The Vatican's Refugee Commission also played a major role, allegedly providing false identities to Nazi fugitives. Even as evidence mounted, the Vatican held firm, refusing to comment or release its secret archives. Steinacher thinks the Vatican's help was motivated by a hope to revive European Christianity and a fear of the Soviet Union. But here's where things get really messy. Through the Vatican Refugee Commission, war criminals were actually given false identities. While the Vatican believed they were mainly helping innocent refugees, records show that Red Cross teams in Genoa, Rome, and Geneva knew Nazis were slipping through the cracks. Former members of the Schutzstaffel often mingled with real refugees, claiming to be stateless ethnic Germans just to get their hands on transit papers. And it gets worse. Sometimes, Jews trying to reach Palestine via Italy were smuggled over the border, along with fleeing Nazis. Number 13. Complicity in the Rwandan genocide. In 2017, Pope Francis formally apologized for the Catholic Church's involvement in Rwanda's 1994 genocide. Pope Francis said he hoped that this humble recognition of the failings of that period, which unfortunately disfigured the face of the Church, may contribute to a purification of memory and help restore renewed trust. Many, however, felt that a mere apology was not enough, given the depth of the atrocities. Not to mention, the Vatican only apologized because the Rwandan government had made several requests to the Church to do so. Even the government believed that the Pope's words were mere lip service. During that horrifying period from April to July 1994, Catholic clergy members faced accusations of enabling the slaughter of the Tutsi ethnic group. Survivors and officials reported that thousands of Rwandans seeking safety in churches ended up killed within those supposed sanctuaries. During wars, churches are known to be the safe place. After all, who would unleash violence in a holy place? Yet many Catholic clergy and nuns betrayed the trust of the people they were supposed to protect. While some priests and nuns hid people in churches and convents, others shockingly sided with the perpetrators. One notorious case involved Father Athanasi Saromba, who ordered bulldozers to demolish his church, which resulted in the loss of lives of the 2,000 Tutsis inside. Sisters Gertrude and Maria were also implicated, accused of guiding militia groups to convents where women and children hid. Both Saromba and the sisters were later prosecuted for their actions. The Church's role in the genocide remains a haunting scar, raising painful questions about moral responsibility. Beyond individual cases, reports emerged that some clergy refused to shelter Tutsis or even handed them over to militias. The horrifying accounts of churches becoming massacre sites contributed to a sharp decline in Rwandans' trust in the Church. Now, you know why Rwanda saw a massive rise in the Pentecostal churches in the country. As per the natives, the surviving Catholic clergy still refuses to accept their complicity in the genocide. Many maintain that the Church, as an institution, wasn't involved, but locals believe otherwise. Number 12. The Vatican's Exorcist Network. If you've ever heard about people acting possessed or talking in strange voices, You might be surprised to learn that the Catholic Church still has a team ready to help, its exclusive squad of exorcists. This specialized group of priests, recognized and trained by the Vatican, practices the ancient ritual of exorcism, a ceremony dating back centuries. Though exorcism might seem like a relic from medieval days or something out of a horror movie, the practice has actually seen a big comeback since the 1990s, especially after the establishment of the International Association of Exorcists. This group boasts over 400 exorcists in Italy alone, with hundreds of thousands of exorcism requests rolling in annually. The late Father Gabriele Amorth, one of the Vatican's most famous exorcists, claimed to have handled around 130,000 exorcisms in his lifetime. Believe it or not, any man of faith can become a Vatican-trained exorcist. You just have to pass the course given by the Church. In 2018, as many as 250 priests from 50 countries arrived in Rome to learn how to identify demonic possession. They also came to hear personal stories from other priests and to gain insight into the rituals involved in expelling demons. This week-long Vatican course was the only international series of lectures of its kind. It was called Exorcism and the Prayer of Liberation and had been running since 2005. Since its launch, the number of priests attending has more than doubled. The event cost $370 and covered the theological, psychological, and anthropological aspects of exorcisms. Catholic priests in several countries had reported to the press that there was an increase in people coming forward with signs of demonic possession. In 2017, Pope Francis told priests that they must not hesitate to refer parishioners to exorcists if they were dealing with genuine spiritual disturbances. And well, that statement alone was enough for priests to go back to their traditional way of fighting demons. Yet, like everything else in the world, this practice has become modern too. You can even get an exorcism on FaceTime, believe it or not. By 2018, 90-year-old Cardinal Ernest Simoni was reportedly conducting up to 5 exorcisms a day over the phone. The Vatican now officially supports exorcism as part of its spiritual duties, expanding its network to meet the demand and training priests who are interested in this terrifying method. They also collaborate with medical professionals to ensure they're not mistaking mental illness for possession. Even in the United States, requests for exorcisms have risen, and well, according to the experts, we might be watching a lot of horror shows. Number 11. The Vatican's hidden courtroom. Way back in 1179, Pope Alexander III set up an ultra-secret tribunal called the Apostolic Penitentiary, which had flown under the radar for more than 8 centuries, only coming to public light in 2009. This tribunal isn't your everyday confession booth. It deals with the most severe sins that even top bishops can't forgive. Only the Pope himself can make that call. Local priests hear mundane moral transgressions all the time, from a husband confessing to cheating on his wife to someone breaking their vow of purity. Yet when it comes to sins and possible crimes like mass murder, genocide, or priests fulfilling their sexual indulgences, the Pope has to be involved. These are some serious sins, and if one requires any sort of absolution, the Pope would want to hear their account directly. Even then, the head of the Vatican can't just forgive the perpetrators. He'd take the matters behind closed doors and discuss them with his close associates to come up with a decision. Sounds a lot, right? Well, it turns out that even cold-hearted criminals can itch for God's forgiveness. This secret apostolic penitentiary was opened to the public in 2009, and only the Pope knows the extent of the horror he has heard so far. Number 10. Vatican Secret Archives. Does the Vatican have exclusive information on the Illuminati? Does the Holy Grail exist? A lot of questions, but not enough answers, right? Well, maybe there are a lot of answers available. They are just hidden in the deepest pits of the Vatican's secret archives, away from the public eye. With over 53 miles of shelf space, the Vatican Secret Archives house documents spanning over 1,000 years. Despite the name, their existence is no real secret. It's the access that's restricted. Only a select few scholars, after a rigorous vetting process, are allowed to dive into these records. Stories have swirled for years, suggesting the archives might shake the foundation of Christianity, and when that happens, the Vatican would never recover. Since 463 AD, these archives have been inherited by each pope, and documents aren't made public until 75 years after their creation. This delay has kept files on sensitive issues. It is rumored that the archive contains files on 2 very big controversies: how Pope Pius aided the Nazis, and heaps of proof that Catholic clergy has abused young boys. In 2019, the name was changed to the Vatican Apostolic Archives, but the secrecy surrounding these legendary vaults remains as strong as ever. Number 9. Popes who chose to step down. Being the Pope might sound like a lifelong gig, but in the last 1,000 years, only 5 popes have chosen to walk away from the job. The first to step down was Benedict IX, who was elected in his early 20s and served 3 tumultuous terms. He bailed on the position in 1036, came back, left again in 1045 when his attempt at marriage fell through, and then was kicked out for good in 1047. Gregory VI resigned under pressure in 1946. Celestine V quit in 1294, fearing he was too inexperienced, only to be jailed by his successor until his death. Gregory XII, facing church chaos, stepped aside in 1415 to unite the church. The latest was Pope Benedict XVI in 2013, citing health concerns, though rumors hinted at internal church disputes. The Pope's resignation came like a wrecking ball to the Catholic community. The last time we saw a Pope stepping down was in 1415, which was over 600 years ago. It was true that Pope Benedict was old for the behemoth of the tasks he had to do. But whistleblowers revealed that he was betrayed by his own butler, Paolo Gabriele. While the duo had a father-son-like relationship, Gabriele was tired of the horrors his boss had buried in the Vatican. So, he went public with documents that were not meant for the public eye. Although the Pope later pardoned Gabriele, the issues at hand had already become public. Apparently, the Vatican had a major gay priest problem, which became a decisive factor for Pope Benedict to leave his position. He knew that to cover up the series of abuse by the clergy, the Vatican Bank had settled lawsuits using donor money, which, in a mundane world, would be a jail-worthy crime. To avoid the heat that would have come up with the scandal, Benedict took a hard decision. Number 8. The Vatican's love affair with wine. If the idea of drinking as a sin held up, Vatican City would be in big trouble. Vatican City residents drink more wine per capita than any other place on Earth, clocking in at about 74 liters a person each year. This is more than double the consumption rates in Italy or France, and about 6 times that of the United States. Why so much? Well, the population here skews older, educated, and mostly male, and communal dining is common. Plus, with wine being used in religious ceremonies, there's always plenty to go around. However, that's just one side of the story. Believe it or not, Vatican City actually has its own supermarket, casually referred to as Spazio della Nonna, a nickname that playfully hints at smuggling. With ultra-low tax rates, shopping here feels a lot like stepping into an exclusive duty-free zone. Those lucky enough to have a Vatican pass can access deals similar to what you'd find on the secured side of an airport. So, is the Holy See secretly the ultimate duty-free shopping spot? It definitely seems like it. Allegedly, this market of sorts is stocked with some of the most luxurious wines in the world. Even when world leaders visit the Vatican, they want a taste of it, so the annual consumption of wine at the Vatican automatically increases. Not to mention, in recent times, the Pope and clergy have been friendly towards the idea of wining and dining. Not too long ago, Pope Francis had expressed his love for wine, even calling it a gift from God. The Pope loves to drink wine, and well, that could be the only thing common between us and him. Despite the hefty responsibilities on his shoulders, he can't miss a tasty glass of wine after an honest man's work. Number 7. Pope Benedict XVI's controversial Nazi past. Pope Benedict, originally Joseph Ratzinger, found himself in hot water due to his conscription into the German anti-aircraft corps during World War II in 1943, while he was still in seminary. This brief stint with the Hitler Youth cast a shadow over his papal election in 2005. Photos from the time show him in uniform at a factory where forced laborers worked. After he deserted in 1945, he spent time in a prisoners of war camp. Yet the reports suggest that the Pope's family was actually quite sympathetic to the Jews and were largely forced to take part in Hitler's evil schemes. After Ratzinger turned 14 in 1941, he was conscripted into the Hitler Youth, as membership had become mandatory for all German boys of that age in March 1939. Eventually, the Allied denazification cleared him, dismissing any anti-Semitic ties, but the controversy remains a talking point. After all, there were a large number of Catholic clergy who had enthusiastically participated in Hitler's mission. There's a rumor that the Vatican keeps the record of those individuals who were close to it, but of course, their names would never be released to the public. Number 6. The Duplessis orphans tragedy. The financial scandals of the Vatican are never-ending. Between 1935 and 1964, thousands of orphaned children were left behind, sometimes because they were born out of wedlock or placed in the care of the state by a parent or family member. These children were brought up in facilities like nurseries, orphanages, and even psychiatric hospitals, many of which were operated by Catholic congregations. Children in these programs often felt very fortunate. Under the Church, no harm would be done to them. Or that's what they thought. One day, those children were forced to act insane for the doctors who were allegedly doing routine checkups on them. Turns out, Quebec's Premier Maurice Duplessis, with backing from the Catholic Church, reclassified thousands of orphans as mentally ill, all for extra government funds. The horrific result? Over 20,000 kids faced unnecessary lobotomies, shock therapies, and other cruel treatments. Known as the Duplessis orphans, these children suffered lasting trauma. Children in these institutions received only minimal care, often facing strict, punishing discipline. Some were neglected, mistreated, or even abused. Many suffered severe physical violence at the hands of religious staff or guardians, who sometimes wielded leather straps or wooden rods as tools of punishment. Once out of the institution, these children found it very hard to fit into the mundane world. So, they disappeared for 20 years. Their story came back into the spotlight in 1991 when Pauline Gill published Les Enfants de Duplessis. This book opened the door for many more stories and personal accounts of the children, exposing the immense greed of the Vatican. Eventually, they fought for and won a settlement from Quebec, though the Church has yet to formally apologize. Number 5. Secret children of priests. Imagine being forced into a life without a supporting or loving father around, especially when he is alive and well. More shockingly, the father in question is someone you meet every Sunday in church or outside, yet you never know about the special connection you have with them. Must be hard, right? That's the story of thousands of secret children of priests who don't get acknowledged by their own fathers. Abandoned and neglected, these children speak of the layers of secrecy and scandal in the Vatican. For centuries, Catholic priests could marry and have children, but the Church enforced a celibacy rule in the 12th century. For years, the Vatican kept its position on the matter very ambiguous. Yet there was one thing quite clear: the priests were not getting punished for their transgressions. Apparently, all popes have known about their clergy fathering children in secrecy, and at times, even directed them funds for their expenses and education. Yet those records were never made official. As per the canon lawyers, there's no law approved by the Vatican that dissolves the priesthood of individuals who indulge in such behaviors. However, the Church had made its own guidelines for such priests, yet chose to keep them hidden from the public, until a 2019 leak showed it all. The same year, the Vatican acknowledged for the first time that it had secret guidelines for priests who broke their celibacy vows and fathered children. However, it chose not to disclose these guidelines, calling it an internal matter. Alessandro Gisotti, a Vatican spokesman, explained to the New York Times that the fundamental principle of the 2017 document was focused on the protection of the child. The document advised that any cleric who fathered a child should leave the priesthood to assume his responsibilities as a parent by devoting himself exclusively to the child. Even then, priests feared backlash. Admitting to a sin of that degree meant that they'd lose all credibility in front of the Vatican as well as their people. So, they never admitted to any wrongdoing, leaving their children all alone. Number 4. The not-so-holy popes. Popes are typically viewed as paragons of virtue, but a few have earned infamy instead. Take John XII, who led from 955 to 964 and was notorious for his violent, immoral acts, including gambling and murder. He was just around 18 years old when he took up the papal mantle, and if you trust the stories, he ran the church like a power-drunk teenager with zero restraint. By most accounts, his papal palace was basically a mix of a wild frat house and a shady brothel, anything but holy. Whichever version you go with, one thing's certain: John didn't live a life of celibacy. In fact, legend says he met his end in the middle of a scandalous moment, suffering a stroke while with someone else's wife. However, at least, he was a problem that went away rather relatively quickly. This wasn't the case for Pope Benedict IX, a demon from hell and so vile, so foul, so execrable that I shudder to think of it. Those are just a few of the colorful descriptions that saints and other popes have used to talk about Pope Benedict IX. This pope held the office 3 separate times, almost like a relentless virus the church just couldn't shake. His first round as pope ended when he was forced to flee Rome after citizens rose up in revolt over his violent antics. He returned for a second try, only to sell the papacy to his godfather, who then became Pope Gregory VI. An act that was, frankly speaking, atrocious. But even that wasn't the end of him. A few years later, Benedict IX returned yet again, took back his position, and ultimately German armies finally drove him out of Rome. Then there's Pope Stephen VI, who had his predecessor's corpse exhumed and put on trial in a bizarre spectacle that led to his own brutal demise. Pope Stephen was far from friendly with his predecessor, Pope Formosus. In fact, not chummy is putting it lightly. By the time Stephen took power, Formosus had been dead for months. But for Stephen, even his rival's death wasn't enough. He ordered that Formosus's decaying body be dug up, dressed in papal robes, and seated on the throne for a posthumous trial. The verdict was as grim as expected. Formosus was found guilty. Stephen then ordered his body to be dragged through the streets of Rome and thrown into the Tiber River. Though Stephen won this infamous cadaver trial, his victory was short-lived. He was strangled to death by an enemy just over a year later. Number 3. The story of Pope Joan. Legend has it that a woman named Pope Joan somehow disguised herself as a man and became pope during the 9th century. Most versions of her story paint her as a gifted and educated woman who disguised herself as a man, often driven by a lover's influence. According to the most popular accounts, her talents allowed her to climb the ranks within the church until she was elected pope. Her secret was dramatically exposed when she gave birth during a public procession, after which she died, either by murder or natural causes, depending on the tale. There is a version of the story that says that when the crowd got to know her secret, she was tied to her horse and dragged, which led to her demise. Following this shocking event, it's said that church processions avoided that spot, the Vatican erased her name from official records, and a ritual was introduced to ensure that only men could become pope. While historians largely dismiss this as a myth cooked up by church critics, citing it as a hyperbolic version of a more realistic story. One version of the age-old story offers a different ending for the female pope. Rather than dying right after her exposure, she was imprisoned and deposed. Afterward, she spent many years doing penance. Eventually, her son from the affair became the Bishop of Ostia, and when she passed away, he ordered her burial in his cathedral. Number 2. Sexual abuse scandals. For decades, sexual abuse scandals have rocked the Catholic Church. The first whispers emerged in the United States during the mid-1980s, and soon after, similar allegations came out of Ireland and Austria. Persistent investigative reporting uncovered systematic abuse across multiple countries, leading to a series of financial settlements for victims between 2000 and 2010. In 2019, Pope Francis pledged to hold abusers accountable, but he's yet to deliver on his promises. According to several reports so far, the Vatican has spent more than $4 billion on covering up their crimes. The money reportedly went to covering lawsuits, attorney fees, and funding the new lives of the accused. Has the Vatican ever shown any official paper trail for how it utilizes the donations it gets every year? Well, nope. Number 1. The crime capital of the world. Believe it or not, Vatican City holds one of the highest crime rates per capita worldwide. Why? Millions of tourists pour into this tiny city-state every year, and with minimal law enforcement and no prison, pickpocketing and petty theft run rampant. Italy has an agreement with the Vatican to handle prosecutions, showing how complicated keeping order can be in the world's smallest sovereign state.